Welcome back to Way of the Wrench, and on today's very special episode, I'm going to be showing you absolutely everything you need to know to be able to safely and properly bleed or flush the brake fluid from your vehicle. So let's not waste any time, let's get into it. So a good couple questions you might have right off the bat is, what is bleeding your brakes, what is flushing your brakes, and what's the difference between the two? So the first one, bleeding your brakes, is when we are trying to get rid of all of the air out from our hydraulic brake system. Now, the reason why we don't want air in there is a simple fluid dynamics thing. Air is compressible, whereas fluids are not. And what that means is when we push our brake pedal, we want that brake fluid to instantly pressurize all the way up to our brakes and give us our brakes to their full power instantly. Now, if we have air in that system, when we push the brake pedal, what we're going to do is start compressing that air bubble, and a lot of the force goes into compressing that air and not really pushing the fluid against our brakes, so we don't have good brakes and our brake pedal will feel spongy. Okay? Now, when we are talking about flushing our brakes, we are talking about getting rid of the old brake fluid. Now, brake fluid is hygroscopic, and what that means is it will slowly take the moisture from the air and absorb it into the fluid. And over the years, that moisture inside your brake fluid will actually rust your brake components from the inside out. So it's recommended you flush your brakes every 2, 3, 4 years. Generally, brake fluid is clear, then it starts to age, it goes yellow, then kind of brown, and then eventually goes black. So that's why you would want to do a flushing of your brakes. Now, the difference between the two, the procedure for the both of them are exactly the same, so let me show you that. In order to make this job a lot easier, I would highly recommend that you jack the vehicle up and put it on 4 jack stands, and if you don't know how to do that, I will post a great video for you so you can go watch that before you tackle this. Now, before you go up off the ground, I would crack your lug nuts free, that way you can take the wheels off when the vehicles are up in the air. Now, for you guys, in this vehicle's case, I've got it up on a hoist. That way it's easier for me to film for you guys. So at this point, go ahead and take all your 4 wheels off. So the very first thing that you need to do is you need to break your bleeder screws. Now, this is the #1 thing that nobody talks about, yet it is the worst part of this job. If you can get that bleeder screw cracked, you're going to have no problems. If you start stripping these, or they've been in there for 20, 30 years and you can't get them out, that's where the job becomes an absolute nightmare. So here's my tip. You are going to get under this car, if it's been 20, 30 years, maybe even a couple of days ahead before you do the job, get some WD-40 or some kind of penetrating fluid, and you're going to spray on the bleeder screw to give it some time to soak in so that this job will be a little bit easier. Now, if it's really, really rusted up, you can also use some heat, think like a little propane kind of torch, and get it nice and hot and take a little birthday candle and melt the wax so it goes into the threads right around the bleeder screw. Now, the other big thing, in most cases you can get away with, is just cracking it free. And you're going to use a socket and a socket wrench. Make sure it's a 6-point socket, and make sure you're going the right way, lefty-loosey. And you don't want to just kind of muscle it. You want to make sure you're going the right direction and give it a good crack. And if it all works out great, it'll be cracked. Immediately change the direction and just snug it up so you're not leaking the brake fluid. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, with the wheel off, find your caliper, and then you're going to find a little screw thing with a little rubber cap, and the cap might be missing, but usually try to keep them on. Take off the little rubber boot, and then get your 6-point socket, make sure you have the right size. So in this case, this is 10 millimeters. Make sure you're going the right direction and crack it. Okay, and then go back and then snug it up so that you're not leaking any brake fluid, and then move on to the next corner of the car. So in this case, that one was really easy to crack because this is a brand new caliper that we just changed out. And if you want to know how to do that, I'll post a link to the video where we did that replacement. So this one was easy. They are not all the same. It just depends on how old this is and how long it's been since that's been cracked free. Okay, now this vehicle has drum brakes on the rear, so it's the same exact thing, except you're looking at a different spot. So on the back of the drum, back here, there's going to be a wheel cylinder with a bleeder screw. So let me show you that. On the back here, you can see where the brake line is coming in. Here's our bleeder screw, so take off the little rubber booty. And then this one is a little smaller than the front, so it's an 8 mil. So get an 8 mil socket, make sure you're going lefty-loosey, and then go ahead and crack this side. There, it's cracked. Close it immediately so you're not leaking brake fluid. Now, quick note and something to learn for all you inspiring gearheads. When you first start out, you can make some simple mistakes, and this is one of them. So here's my wrench. holding this up at 12 o'clock. This is lefty-loosey, so that's loosening. That side's tightening, so this is set for loosening. But notice that when I put this on the other side of the bleeder screw, it actually reverses from my point of view. So it's important to know that. So it's actually going to look like it's going righty-tighty from this side, even though the tool is correctly set and it's loosening. Okay, so something important to know so that you don't put it on from the backside here and go this way and strip out your bleeder screw. And for you poor unfortunate souls who have stripped your bleeder screws, probably because you didn't know about my tips there, you are in a world of hurt right now. This job has gotten nightmarish levels. So what do you do when you got a stripped bleeder screw? Couple tricks for you. Find the next size down socket, and you might actually be benefit to jump from the other set. So from metric to imperial, there might be one kind of in between that's just a little bit less, and you can hammer that on and then try to get that off. Go back to using heat and the wax trick first though. Other than that, pair of ice grips and really reef on how tight it's grabbing. Make sure you're going lefty-loosey. Worst case, you're gonna end up drilling that out. So hopefully that's not you and you're able to use my tricks. All right, so the next thing we have to do is we have to replace the old brake fluid in our master cylinder so we can replace it with fresh stuff, and that way when we are doing our brake flush or our bleed, we're putting in new fluid. And we also need to make sure that it is topped up to the full before we start. Otherwise, if this gets empty or low when we're doing this bleed procedure, we could actually have it suck air in the system and we'd have to start all over. So the master cylinder is right in front of the firewall where you would be driving inside the car. So it's right here. Take a look for a cap. The cap will say something like use .3 brake fluid. Take that off. Okay, get yourself an empty container that you can put the old fluid in and dispose of it properly later. And you're also going to need a turkey baster. Now, you can steal this from the wife's kitchen, but make sure it does not go back. This is now a shop tool and only used for brake fluid or anything in the shop. Otherwise, if you don't have one of these, just go to the dollar store, only $1 or $2. So what you do is you depress the bulb at the front, let it into the fluid, suck up some fluid, tilt it so you don't make a big mess, put it in your container and pour the fluid out there, and then just keep repeating that process until you have the master cylinder empty. Okay, and then you're going to take your brand new brake fluid and make sure that you have the same exact dot designation. So this is .3 and it says that on the master cylinder cap. And you're going to carefully pour it in there and fill it up till it's up to the max line, which is on the side of the reservoir. If you can't see that, if you shine a light on one side and shine it through, you'll be able to see the level a lot better. Okay, and then go ahead and put your cap back on. And if you did make an oopsie and spilled a little bit of this brake fluid, make sure you wipe it up now, and maybe even some soapy water, because it is acidic. If you leave it overnight, you're gonna have some missing paint on some of your metal parts. Okay, for the next part here, you're gonna need some things. So first thing, you're gonna need yourself a box stand or a combination wrench for the size of your bleeder screw that you're trying to undo. So this is for an 8mm. You're gonna need a 10mm for the front. The other thing is you're gonna need some clear surgical tubing. You can get this stuff pretty cheaply from any kind of medical supply store, and I recommend you just get like a 10-foot spool of it. And I would recommend you get 1/4 inch outside diameter and 3/8 inch outside diameter. That way you will fit most of the bleeder screws. And what we're looking for is a very tight fit when you squish it and turn it onto the bleeder screw so that no air can get in past it. Now, the reason why I suggest you get 10 feet is the first time you use this stuff, you're going to have it work perfectly, but the next time, maybe in a year or two, when you go to use your little bleeding brake setup here, the hose gets quite brittle and hard and you won't be able to use it again. So rather than having to go back out and find some more stuff, you just buy 10 foot of it and you'll have it when you need it. Now, the other reason why you want to get clear is because if you are bleeding your brakes, we need to see the air bubbles are gone and there's solid fluid coming out so that we know we're done that part. And if we're flushing our brakes, we will literally see the transition from kind of gross, dark, nasty brake fluid as opposed to the nice, clear, new stuff. So we can't see that if we've got a hose that's not clear. Okay, and the last thing is you just need like a container that we can put a little bit of brake fluid into it. The first time could literally be new fluid, and then after that it doesn't really matter if there's old fluid in here. The reason why we want it roughly half full is that when we go to do the bleed procedure or the flush procedure, if for whatever reason you get the bleeding procedure wrong and you start sucking on the hose, you will suck in fluid rather than air. Okay? Otherwise, this is just used as a catch container for the fluid that's going to come out. Now, I've just used a little 750 ml Pepsi bottle here, and I've literally had this for almost 10 years. So that's what I'm using here. And you can see there's my old hoses with both sizes for my bleed procedure. Now, there are a lot of different ways to actually do the procedure for bleeding or flushing your brakes. And the reason why is that some of them work and some of them don't work, and some of them sometimes they work on a certain car, but they don't work on that car. And that's why there's so many different ways of doing this. Everything from gravity bleeding, getting someone to help you pump the brakes, there's suction kits, and then the last one, which I'm going to show you, which is really good, is pressure bleeding. So the problem is that when you go to do one of these methods, sometimes it works and it's great, and then sometimes it doesn't. And it's based off of the way the car is engineered. How high the master cylinder is above where the bleeder screw is the bleeder screw mounted on the side or on the bottom of a caliper and not at the top where the air naturally wants to go? Does the brake line have kind of a spot in it where air can get trapped, and those kinds of things? So let's talk about these methods. So gravity bleeding is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to let gravity do the work for us. So what we do is we get our little catch can and surgical tubing set up like I'm going to show you in a second here, and you crack the bleeder screw open and allow the brake fluid to just naturally kind of come out through the bleeder screw. And in a certain amount of time, when you see the fluid color change or you get all the air bubbles out, you just simply close the bleeder screw and then move on to the next corner of the car. Now, the problem with gravity bleeding is sometimes it doesn't work because the fluid is not draining out fast enough to push the air bubbles out. But there are some mechanics that really like using this because they can get it all set up and then set a timer and go work on something else for 5 minutes and then come back and just check that it's okay, close it up, and then set it up on another corner to bleed again while they're doing some other job. All right, now the brake bleed suction kits, they work pretty good. And how they work is they've usually got kind of a container that you create a vacuum in, either through a pump or some kind of like spray nozzle. And that vacuum sucks the fluid into the container, bringing out all the bubbles and all the old fluid. Now, they actually work pretty good, but in my experience, what happens is they work great the first time, and you wash it with soap and water and you put it away, and in 2 years you want to go do this again and it does not work. And the reason why is the seals that are in the cap of the container get hard and brittle, and now they don't want to make a vacuum, and now you're struggling to get this brake bleed to happen for you. So I would recommend you don't actually buy the suction kits unless you're doing some kind of one-time use DIY method that you might be able to find online. Okay, now the traditional way of doing this that works about 95% of the time, so this is going to be the go-to for most of you guys, is getting someone to help you pump the brake pedal while you're bleeding the brakes. Now, this person does not have to know anything. You can just teach them what the instructions are that I'm going to tell you in a second here. And you get them to sit in the car. Make sure you show them which is the brake pedal in case they don't know. It's not the one all the way to the right. That's your gas pedal. It's the one to the left with the big pad. That's your brakes. And you're going to ask them to roll the window down so you guys can hear each other and communicate properly. And then these are the instructions. So the person that is bleeding the brakes, when they're ready, they're going to yell out, "down." And then the person that's in the car is going to pump the brakes 3 times and hold the brake pedal. And they're going to yell out, "down." And when the person on the doing the bleed process hears "down," you're going to open up the bleeder screw for about 2-3 seconds. You're going to see some fluid go by, maybe some bubbles, and then you're going to close the bleeder screw. And then once the bleeder screw is closed, you're going to yell out "up," and the person is just going to let up on the pedal and yell out "up" so that you know that they're off the pedal. And then this process is just going to keep repeating until you get all the bubbles out or the fluid has changed color and you're done your flushing process. Now, let the person know that when you open up the bleeder screw, when they're holding the brake pedal, it will start to sink and may even go right to the floor. Just tell them just to keep the pressure on it and not to let the pedal up. If they lift the pedal up, when you have the bleeder screw open, there's a chance for you to suck in air through the end instead of the fluid. So make sure that you communicate properly and that won't happen. So now that I've talked about how to do that traditional pumping of the brakes method, let's show you how to do that. Now, we always start on the corner of the car that is the furthest from the master cylinder. That way we are exchanging most of the brake fluid when we do that one corner. When you are done the one corner, before you go to the next corner, you have to make sure that that master cylinder is full to the top. Otherwise, you run the risk of running it to the empty and sucking in air and having to restart the whole process. So once you've done the right rear corner, Check your master cylinder, top it up, and then go ahead and do the left rear, then go top it up, then do the front right, go top up the master cylinder, and then the very last one is the closest one to the master cylinder, which is your front left corner. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the boxed or the closed end of the wrench and put it on our bleeder screw first, and we want to make sure that we can go in the direction, probably about at least a quarter of a turn to loosen this. So I'll now put it back here so I can have the full extension to go to here. Then you're going to take your surgical tubing and you're going to push it on to the bleeder screw. Now you want a pretty snug fit. If it just easily goes on, then it's probably not going to be doing a good job for you. So this 1/4 inch OD surgical tubing is about the right size. Okay, and then you're going to put the other end of it in our catch container that we were talking about. Okay, so now we're ready to go. Now I have somebody up at the brakes ready to go. His name's Max. All right, Max, are you ready to go?
Yeah, already.
Okay, and I've already instructed him with the instructions he needs. All right, so down.
Down.
Okay, and take a look at the tubing here and see if the fluid comes out or the bubbles. Crack it open, just a couple seconds. Close it, and then up. Okay, and then we can just repeat the process. So down. Okay, crack it open for a couple seconds. Close it. Up. And all you're going to do is keep repeating that procedure until you see nothing but nice, clean, clear fluid where the color changes or there's no bubbles. And in this case, this corner should actually be good. We didn't break into this part of the hydraulics. And the fluid is pretty recently changed, so it's we're just making sure there's no bubbles here. So I would say this one is done. When you're ready, you just carefully take this off the bleeder screw. Watch you don't drip it all over the place. Take your wrench off, and before that, just give it a double check. Make sure it's nice and snug tight. Not so stupid tight that the next time you go to do this, you can't undo it. And then put your little rubber booty over the top to make sure nothing goes in there. And if you did do any drips of brake fluid, give it a little wipe now. Okay, don't forget once you've done a corner of the car to come back up to the master cylinder and check if the fluid is too low. And if you can't really see, sometimes shaking this, you'll see the little fluid kind of move around in the container or get a light behind here. So in this case, it didn't really move much from the max line, so we're okay. Next time we check, maybe it is a bit lower. You're going to open this up and pour some more brake fluid up to the full max line, and then close this cap to finish the next corner. So you should be checking this after each corner. And at the very end of the job, you should make sure that this is topped up to max. Now I've got set up on the left rear corner here, and I've got the wrench put on and the surgical tubing all ready to go here. All right, Max, down.
Down.
Watch the tubing for the fluid. 1, 2, 3, looks nice and clean. Close it. Up.
Up.
Down.
Down.
Okay, open it up again. Nothing but fluid, no bubbles. Close it up. Up.
Up.
Down.
Down.
Okay, one more time, we'll open it up. 0 bubbles at all and nice and clean fluid. So we'll close this up and make sure it's nice and tight. Take the line off, wrench off, and replace the little rubber booty and move on to the front. All right, after checking the master cylinder, we're on to the third corner, which is the front right. So once again, Max, down.
Down.
There's the fluid. Oh, there's a bubble. Close it. Up.
Up.
Down. Okay, more fluid. Oh, a big burst of bubble air there. Up.
Up.
Down.
Down.
Oh, there we go. Not any bubbles that time. Close it up. Up. Down. Okay, another burst of fluid. No bubbles. That's good. Fluid looks clean. Close it up. Up. Down. Up. Down. Okay, a little bit of bubble there. up, down, okay, we're still getting air in here. Close it up, down, up, down, up, down, all right, up. So this one here, we replaced the flex line and the caliper, so there might be a ton of air in here, and there actually is kind of like a curving pocket or a curving upwards where the air could get trapped in the flex line. So this, we're gonna keep going here until we get no bubbles. If we kind of can't get that, or we find we have spongy brakes when we're done, we're gonna have to do pressure bleeding on this vehicle. So we'll go a couple more times here. Down. Up, down, up, down, up, down, all right, I think this vehicle is going to be a candidate for pressure bleeding, which also lets me actually teach this for you. So we're going to do the other last corner, and then if we have a spongy pedal, we're going to show you the pressure bleeding. Okay, now we're on the front left and the very last corner here. So max, down. Okay, up, down, up, down, up, down, okay, there we go. No bubbles, clean fluid, make sure this is tight, and we are all done. Okay, and then when you're all done, check the level of the master cylinder, and it is low, so we're gonna top it up here. And don't forget to cap it. Okay, at this point, you should be able to check your brake pedal, and every vehicle is a little different, so kind of have a gauge of what your brake is usually feeling like. But in general, it should be up at the top and should feel somewhat firm. You push down on it and it kind of stops and feels firm. If it feels really spongy and goes down way lower than normal, then I would say you still have air in the system. And all you're going to do at that point is you're going to repeat the entire process we just showed you. So start right at the rear right, do all four corners, make sure that you don't empty the master cylinder, and then recheck. So sometimes it requires a second round of bleeding the brakes to get all the air out. And then sometimes you have a problem with this two-person bleeding setup where it is just not fast enough to get the air out of the system. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's say that we are unable to get rid of that spongy brake pedal feeling, and we feel like we're seeing lots of air still coming out on those front brake lines. So we need a better way of doing that, and that is going to be pressure bleeding. So let me show you this setup. Okay, and this is my pressure bleed kit. And this one comes from a company called Speedy Bleed. I highly, highly recommend this. It's a bit pricey. If I remember correctly, it's almost over $1,000. However, the reason why it's so expensive is because it comes with a whole bunch of very nice adapters so that you can do this on just about every car that you encounter. So there is the actual container and the lines and the regulator, which I'll show you in a second. And then on the instructions here, you can actually see which of these different adapters will fit your master cylinder. And if none of these adapters fit, then there's some generic universal ones. So this would be kind of for an old muscle car one, or this style for kind of like imports. So let me show you how to use this. The first thing you got to do is you got to put some new brake fluid in here, and you got to be above this minimum line. So I'm kind of like here. So if you need to put some in, just take this cap off. Pour some new stuff in, then close it back up. Okay, and the setup for this is you take your cap off your master cylinder, find the adapter that fits, and this needs to fit pretty nice and snug. So if it doesn't seem to spin on, it'll probably be one of the universal ones. And then you take the end of this hose that has a quick connect and you put it down onto that. So for the Speedy Bleeder pressure kit, what you have to do is take the dust cap off a tire, and this actually goes on and uses your tire pressure to push in the fluid. So put that on. And this here is the pressure regulator, and in the instructions they want you to set the PSI to 15 PSI. So you're going to turn this clockwise till the needle goes to 15. And at this point, before you start going and bleeding your brakes, make sure that you do not have a leak on your master cylinder, because you are now supplying air pressure, which is pushing on the new brake fluid and pushing it into the master cylinder. And if you got a leak here, it's going to be pretty obvious. So take a look. In this case, it looks dry, so we're good to go. Okay, so just to make sure you understand what's going on, we are using some of the pressure from the tire. We're limiting it to 15 PSI, and that air pressure is pushing down on the level of our brake fluid in here, applying 15 pounds of pressure. Now the pickup tube for the hose that's going to our master cylinder and supplying our new brake fluid is under pressure, and so the pickup tube is down here, goes up and goes into our master cylinder. So as we are bleeding the corners of the car, we are replenishing it with brake fluid. So when you're using this setup, you don't actually have to keep checking your master cylinder between the corners, because it will automatically be filled. The only thing you do have to do is at the very end here, once you disconnect it all, you may have to suck some of the excess brake fluid from the master cylinder, because it might be a touch over the max. Okay, the best thing about this pressure bleeding is it's all pressurized. So as soon as I crack this open, you're going to see fluid just continuously come out, and then all I got to wait is for all the bubbles to be gone and nice clean fluid. Lock it, take off the hose, and that is done. So like this. There's the fluid, no bubbles, nice and clear. And you can go for as long as you need. I'm still seeing a couple bubbles, so I'll go a little further. Now, something important to note, if you see lots of little bubbles, like a stream of bubbles, could be that your hose is not tight fitting on your bleeder screw. All right, I've let this run for about 10 seconds and there's no bubbles and it's nice and clear. This is going to be a good bleed on this one. So close it up, make sure it's nice and snug. Take the fitting off and go do the other side, and we don't have to top up the master cylinder because that pressure bleeder kit's doing it automatically for us. Okay, and here's the last corner. Oh, look at that. Lots of air bubbles coming out. Lots of air bubbles. So that would be the cause of the spongy brake pedal up top. Okay, now it's starting to slow down a bit. Okay, now there's a nice solid stream of no bubbles. Let this run a couple more seconds more. There we go. That's about 10 seconds of running and there's no bubbles, nice clean fluid, so we're going to close that up. When you're all done your brake bleed procedure, it's not a bad idea to get someone to hold the brakes down really hard and double check that you don't have any leaks on your bleeder screws. That way you don't have any issues in the future. To disconnect your pressure bleeder kit safely so you don't make a big mess, take the air pressure off first. Bleed out the air pressure by taking the air cap off. Then you can close that back up. Then you can disconnect the quick connect, going to your master cylinder. Take off your adapter. Okay, take a look at the level of your fluid. It should be up to the top at the max. In this case, it's right where I need it to be. But if it was above and too high, then just use the turkey baster in the container to suck a little bit out till you're at that max level. And then don't forget to put your cap back on. And then don't forget to do a final wipe up of any spilled brake fluid with a cloth. Just to make sure that the seals work on this in a year or two when I go to use this again, not a bad idea to get some soapy water and just kind of wash that brake fluid off a little bit so that it will help those seals last as long as they possibly can. If you take care of your tools, they'll take care of you. And if none of the adapters actually fit your master cylinder, they do have universal ones in there like this. So the idea is there's a big rubber pad here that's going to seal on the top surface when we tighten up these wing nuts. So make sure these wing nuts are spun out all the way like this. And then this strap goes underneath the metal part of your master cylinder. Make sure you're not going over any brake lines or you're not on the plastic part. And then on the one side here is a hook. So try to get that belt as tight as you can and get it on the lowest hook, or the lowest hole you can. Okay, like that. Center your fitting right in the middle of the master cylinder and then use these wing nuts to start tightening it up on that strap. And you want to go pretty tight. If you go kind of loose on it, it'll leak like crazy. Make sure you kind of evenly go down on both sides. Something like that, nice and tight. And then when you set up your pressure bleeder, just make sure it doesn't leak here because that's a common thing if these are not tight. Okay, and if your pedal is up at the top and it does feel nice and firm and not spongy, before you drive out of here at 60 kilometers an hour and find out you really don't have brakes, go 5 or 10K backwards or forwards and put the brakes on and confirm that you do have brakes. That's a wrap in another video from Way of the Wrench, this time on absolutely everything you need to know to be able to bleed and flush your brakes properly. Now, if you have any questions or concerns about what we did in the video, why don't you put a comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And if you haven't already, why don't you join us on Instagram? That way you can see what's going on in the shop in between videos. And if I was able to help you a lot today and help you save some money and become even more like a gearhead, maybe consider looking at my Patreon in the video description below, and that way you can support me and my endeavor to make more videos like this for you guys in the future. Till next time, take it easy.